going on, everybody? I have somehow made it back here after some time away. I wanted to thank everyone for tuning in. Thank you for your time and patience. But let's go ahead and start. The day is now July 27th, 2023. Again, thank you all for waiting. A lot of people have asked me, "Hey, Marcus, when are you going to start making videos again?" I'm like, I've been busy, a lot of things going on in my life, just like everyone else in this world. And sometimes we just need some time away, and have to take care of some things. But I try to keep some of you entertained. I try to upload some videos. I have been on some trips recently. I've been through Asia. Um, Spent about almost a month there, going through Vietnam and the Philippines as well. So it's been a nice time. Uh, but now I'm happy to be back and making lives again. So it's always good. If anyone has any questions so far, feel free to just drop them in the comment. Yep. Thanks, Scott. Chris, Scott. Appreciate the comment. So, yeah, today we're going to talk about Peru. And before I talk more about Peru, I'm going to bring on my dear friend, Moore. Moore, welcome. Thank you for wanting to come on. Now, some may ask, oh, why are we talking about Peru again? And just like refresh some people's memories. I was born in Peru. I was adopted, and I was only there for like 6 months of my life. But Peru means a lot to me as my birth country, right? I follow a lot of the politics going on, the news, especially going on right now, what's happening. And I think that this current issue in terms of the protests, the thousands of people that are still unhappy with the current president, the current administration, and want change. But unfortunately, the change still is not happening. Now, Moore, I think Moore might be a little bit busy right now. I'm sure he'll return here shortly. Uh,
Hey, Mark. Yeah, I'm here.
oh, you are? Okay, cool. Nice.
Yeah,
Welcome, Moore.
thank you.
Yeah, of
Thank you
course.
for inviting me to this amazing life.
It's my pleasure. It's always good to have you, Moore. You've been able to come on before in recent lives, so your presence is always welcomed by myself and the guest too. Um, so yeah, man, it's pretty crazy what's going on. You and I both, being Peruvians, but in the U.S., it's unfortunate a little bit to see what's happening, and you know, I I want to believe that that change can happen in Peru, but I think like drastic measures need to happen for that change. Um, and I think it really goes about like starting from the beginning, right? And so where did like things kind of well, I guess first it's important to talk about like the current like issue right now, and that is that like there's still protests going on. There's still thousands of people, as I've said before, that are unhappy with the current government. They want change, and that's not happening. There is a significant amount of people that are happy with the administration as well. There's most of these people, I believe, are in Lima, from the city, and we can go more about that as to why maybe the majority of the people in Lima are happy with the administration because the administration is based in Lima. Correct? That's where the president is, government is. And they're able to take care of most of those people in Lima. So, that being said, this is a crisis that's happening. Because of COVID, because of many other things in terms of poverty and corruption. And now, fast forward to today, there are some serious problems going on. And we'll bring up some articles as well, which we'll be actually using some AI, Chat GTP, and Cloud to summarize these articles, and just give our points in terms of what we believe are the better solutions that can happen for Peru. So yeah, we kind of like discuss like the dissatisfaction with like the current government, right? More, would you say that other than what I've discussed in terms of like, President Pedro Castillo being ousted, now I believe he's in jail, correct? He had tried to get rid of, as I would say, Congress, eliminate it. Um, and as soon as that happened, he was, ousted, put in jail. And the majority of people voted for Castillo, right? So they did not like the fact that Castillo was put in prison. And this is why you're seeing all these protests that are happening, correct? I mean, there's other reasons as well. Would you like to maybe, I mean, add on to what I've said in terms of like if I'm missing anything, like um, why we're seeing these protests? Like certainly there's other reasons that people are unhappy with the way of life right now. The people are unhappy with just you know, the treatment from the government, and I mean not just from Lima, obviously, but from other cities as well, from rural areas where Pedro Castillo's popularity was at its highest, was from the rural parts of Peru, around Cusco, and other cities, that are around, like near the Amazon. Also, I forget the name, Arequipa, yeah, around southern Peru, but especially around like the rural areas. So yeah, more. Maybe you would want to add something on to that maybe I've missed.
Yeah, hey, thank you for that. Absolutely. I love to listen to you and your voice, and I think now we have such a great opportunity because of your channel to just kind of talk about some of these stuff. I think whoa, sorry about that. I think that everybody is our audience. Everybody who subscribed to your channel is an audience, but everybody who is just maybe they're from a Spanish speaking country, or their ancestors are from a Spanish speaking country, or their parents are from a Spanish speaking country, because the problems that Peru faces are very similar to other Latin American countries, such as, like, Nicaragua, Chile, Bolivia, Ecuador, like all these countries where actually, like, brown Americans live their day to day since ancient times, and so in that sense, I think that what we're going to talk about is not just about Peru, but we can make implications about Peru's trials, difficulties, struggles in government, and apply it to maybe other Latin American countries that experience similar issues in their country. I think that's why, or I think that's our audience, right? Everybody is our audience, but more especially our audience for this video specifically is just those people that come from those Spanish speaking countries, or their parents came from them. A lot of you guys, me myself included, we're a lot of you guys are in a different country because the country that your parents were from did not have the opportunities, ample opportunities for pursuit of happiness and pursuit of economical well-being. So that's why they travel somewhere else to pursue those opportunities. So that's why I'm saying that everybody is our audience. So I just wanted to clear that off my mind. Thank you, Marcus. And furthermore, just addressing some of the stuff you said, I can think of kind of two ways to go about this issue of what's happening in Peru. For example, I can say from an immediate sense, uh, why are there so many protests in Peru, which is very similar to what happens in Chile, Argentina, Bolivia, and I think Colombia had major protests. Ecuador had major protests against their presidents and other branches of the government. So it's not just exclusively to Peru. This is an issue that is quite common in other countries that all of you guys are from, or your parents are from. I think why there are protests is because, mostly because of this sort of like feeling of disagreement, and just um, not avoiding, but rejecting, this feeling of rejection toward Congress and toward their behavioral pattern of trying to impeach president after president. It's only been 5 years, but Peru has had more than six presidents in the last 5 years, which is almost equivalent to one president per year, which is crazy. So Congress is consistently outputting this behavioral pattern of obstructing the executive's work, of calling into questioning minuscule things that just come out quite pedantic, and just not letting people work, especially the Pedro administration. They were not they were very much interrupted by Congress. So because of that, the Peruvian population, majority of the Peruvian population has a feeling of rejection toward the government because of immediately because of those actions, and they're going into this onto the streets to protest. Uh, so that's why they're there. But I mean, in the appropriate time, we can also go into its historical reason why. Like it's not just immediately what's happening now in 2023, but it's a carry on of historical events such as uh, the most noticeable of recent times is 2019, right before the pandemic, when the Congress was closed and called for new elections for Congress women and men. uh, so what happened in 2019 was probably such a climax. But we are in another climax. I think it's constantly like one climax after another in Peruvian politics. So I just wanted to say that and keep going with our agenda, Marcus. Hey,
My
I think
bad, I
you're
was
on.
on mute.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah. I was going to thank you more. I was going to ask, do you feel like most of the people that are there protesting are from these like rural areas, like come all the way to Lima to, voice their opposition to the current administration? Would you feel like most of the people that support, um, what's the current president's name? It's not Diana,
Uh,
right?
Dina
Dina.
Boluarte.
Yeah, Belarte. Most of the people that support Belarte are based in Lima itself, and those that are of like middle class that don't feel as affected. Like most of these people that are protesting are those that are lower middle class, that do feel that they aren't living in the life that they want to live. They feel that like the administration is taking everything away from them. They feel like their voice isn't being heard. They want change, and the Congress that Castillo tried to eliminate is not making that possible.
So I think what you're saying is so important, and also because it's important, it needs to be a little bit dissected. I think that the people in Peru don't necessarily, most of the people in Peru don't necessarily support, sort of in a political support type of sense, who or what Dina, the current female president, stands for, because nobody elected her. She's not there because she was elected to be the president, but rather she is the vice president who happened to be there while the other Castillo
Right.
was basically arrested and imprisoned, and now he's on trial, and so all these things that are happening to him. But she was just a replacement. Nobody directly voted for her to be the president. So in that sense, she's not quite like, in the political sense, being supported by, and that people are in the streets because of that. People are in the streets mostly because they reject Congress, which is a common sentiment in Mexico. Maybe not Mexico. We haven't heard of in Mexico, like as of recent, like major protests, or maybe there are. We're just not tuned into those news channels. Uh, but I do know like Ecuador, Bolivia, Colombia have had major protests against their presidents, their congressmen and women. So, uh, and the reason is quite similar, right? This feeling that the government doesn't necessarily represent your interests. It doesn't necessarily have the idea of creating economical opportunities for everyone. Because of that, many people migrate to the United States or Europe, and because of that is why the Peruvian people are in the streets.
Would you say that, I guess, why aren't there more people? Well, when you read in the news, right, that there's like thousands of people, right? Why would you say like the protests and the opposition isn't bigger than what we might think it would be. Like,
Oh,
do you,
you know what? It used to be. That's such a great question because it used to be quite a big, uh, crowded protest. But what it's happening actually now is that there have been so many protests since 2019, 2018, 19. In addition to that article that we looked at, that many Peruvians um, are closer to poverty. Which what it means is that people can't, like, for people further inland inside the country, they can't afford, they can't even afford a ticket to Lima. They can't afford to come to Lima and spend a couple days that they could spend it working. They can't spend that money because, like, as it is now, like, there's so many people in poverty. So what it means is, like, all the people that could have been supporting the protests, they don't show up. So it's a little bit smaller. At least that's what I saw in the news.
yeah, thanks for adding that more. And I think someone said like the state started killing people as well. Yeah, yeah, people did die, from this protest, right? You know, um, a lot of police, do have blood on their hands.
I think, like, if I can go off script for a second, and that's a
Sure.
great thing that the state started killing people as well. Um, I think sorry, I got I got too carried away.
You're
I
good.
think people are getting killed, not necessarily intentionally by the state, but is I think it's a constant. The reason why people are getting killed during these protests, I think, is because there's such informality in the people, and in terms of how they're going to carry this out, and there's such informality in the police or the police organization, how they should react to these. And there's little regulations as to, like, calling people into account, like, hey, what led up to this, to you using you know gases or bombs. Like, there is hardly any accountability after, like, protests. So a lot of, like, police officers or generals or whatever will give orders like, okay, use extreme methods of stopping the protest, which leads to people dying. uh, and it's quite common, dude. It's so, like, at this point, it's going to the point, like, it's quite common for people, for at least one person to die in a protest. Let's see what Alexander says. The police has also repressed the parts of the state that support the protest, such as, well, I didn't see the rest, such as the universities. Yeah, I think I saw a video somewhere on YouTube. This a lot of, like, San Marcos University students were protesting too. Um, but the reason why these protesters are dying is mostly because of the poor methods of holding people accountable, and also poor organization from the police organization. And I think overall, but more, like, abstractly, just like they're like there's no dignity, or there's very little dignity behind what is a democracy, what is the people, and what is a government. There's such little dignity and understanding of what that is, that th- like, there's little sense of, like, the monumental importance of what it is to go and protest for your rights. So I think that's why people, or police react in such a violent way, because people need dignity. Like, they're seeking the dignity of their lives to for a better life. And when we don't value that sentiment, I think it leads to, like, just violent ways of stopping protesters. And maybe within some of the protesters, there could be infiltrated, some other people with different agendas, because what ends up happening is that a lot of times there will be violence from the protesters. Like, they'll break cars, windows, businesses. They'll break into businesses. They themselves will construct, like, DIY sort of bombs. I think they're called Monotov or Molotov bombs.
Molotov. Yeah.
There you go. That they can create. So yeah, it's all of that really.
I think that's a fair assessment to make. We have protests in the U.S. as well, where unfortunately, there was a lot of like buildings and windows like destroyed, right? And some of these people weren't really a part of the protests at all. They just wanted to destroy things. Go
Yeah,
figure.
one major difference is that when you look at a Peruvian pin nail of a news outlet, right? The difference is that in Peru, you will the policeman will pull out like military tanks and point them at the protesters and like move them with these huge tanks. But when you look at a different, maybe here in the United States, news outlet, like like you'll see like uh, many police officers, but you're probably not going to see like freaking military tanks with pointing at the protesters with bombs and shooting um, water at them. Just crazy over the line stuff.
Yeah. Well, I think this person made another good comment, that the militarization of the police was also a product of the Fujimori regime and how he ended the civil war with overwhelming force, right? Would you agree?
That's such dude. I want to kind of invite Alexander to
We had dropped the link.
drop that link. No, this is good. Yeah,
Drop
absolutely.
that link. If anyone wants to
He's
discuss anything
he's either
Peruvian
uh,
related,
first generation or second generation, maybe, but he knows what's happening. Yeah, that's crazy. The militarization of the police was also a product of the Fujimori regime and how he ended the civil. Yeah, that shit was crazy.
yeah, that's true. Like a lot of the people that brutally crushed the opposition that were under Fujimori, like they didn't just disappear once Fujimori was gone, right? Like they're still there.
Yeah, and I think like now that I'm like meditating on Alex's comment, I'm thinking that back in 1993 or 95, I think it was, when Fujimori decided to become a dictator, he did exactly the same thing. He rounded up like a bunch of like military tanks, like huge ass tanks, and a bunch of like police cars and everything, and they basically went and took over Congress. The so now when when they're protesters, they use the same mythology.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy, right? What happened back then. I think it's more crazy how our government here really, supported Fujimori. A lot of governments around the world supported him. And then
Like,
finally, hmm?
sorry, I think it was because he was like, this is really not my area, but I'm just gonna go ahead and talk about it. But I
Sure.
think it's because prior to Fujimori, there was like a president who was kind of he wanted more power and he wanted to become a dictator or something like that. There was something going on with the government. But Fujimori, what he represented was democracy, stability, and open market. So, open market, which is, I think, one of the main concepts behind capitalism, right? So, when you have that, then you have like countries like um, North American countries that support his presidency because he represents open markets and back to normality where foreign companies can come and invest. So I think for that reason he was quite supported, and also his daughter, who is the who his daughter is the anti-hero, dude. She is the antagonist of this journey that Peru's in. Like she's really, really not a good person or a good. No, she's not a really good political leader. She went to Boston University. Did you know that?
No, I didn't know.
Yeah, she went to Boston University, and guess who paid her tuition?
Daddy?
That didn't make, dude. Even the president in Peru, I don't think he would have made enough to. pay for that tuition. I don't know. Or if he did, like he'll probably struggle afterwards after making payments. But she majored, I don't know what she majored in, but she went to Boston University, uh, which was her hiatus from Peru, and then she came back with a boyfriend, I think, or a husband. Maybe she came back already married, and that's when like she started going back into politics and trying to carry on her dad's legacy, I guess. His really bad legacy. I shouldn't even use the word legacy, just his the things he did.
Yeah,
Oh,
she's pretty.
Alex said, it is Fujimori's constitution that allows Congress to recall the president for moral cause. Hey, Alex, there is an article. Why don't you check, Alex, Article 190 and 191? It's under the chapter of decentralization. What do you think of those two articles? Because I think that I think uh, I think that the Congress didn't take into account those articles, because those articles could be a constitutional way of creating reform in the country. Alex says Fujimori embezzled enough. One of the reasons he's on house arrest. Oh, he's on house. Yeah, he's on house arrest now because he was so sick that he couldn't be in jail, so they just put him in house arrest. But even being in jail, he had like he just it was like an apartment basically, television, phone, Wi-Fi, his own backyard. It was crazy. Just um, not your common prison setting.
Right.
All
It's
right, want to move
what?
on to anything else?
Sure. Yeah. Well, did he have one last comment? Or yeah, he can comment whatever he wants. But yeah, homie embezzled enough. One of the reasons why, yeah, he's on house arrest. Yeah, it's crazy how someone that had a Unit 731 aspirations is just put on house arrest, right?
He was in jail, but he around 2020 when the pandemic hit, he got even sicker, and he got like emergency exited into a hospital, and that's when he started pleading for health issues. So he got accepted, I guess, into going into his home for the rest of his arrest or sentence.
But he should be like, you know, kicking, what's it called? Kicking dirt. He should be worm food.
That's
Is what I'm
oh
trying to
god,
say.
so messed up, because that's like a whole thing. Like the things that he did, some of the things that all the shady things that he did in his administration against the Peruvian people. Maybe he thought it was the right thing, but like some really really shady stuff, dude. Like he
Yeah,
messed up.
it's creepy. Yeah, he did try to flee to Japan, and he came back. No, he went to Bolivia, right? He was somewhere else, and then like he got
Yeah,
extradited.
he went to dude. That dude is crazy, and how dare Peruvians still believe in Fujirismo. You know why? Because that dude, just as Alex pointed out, he was being charged uh, for like some constitutional crimes that I'm not. This is back in 1990 something. Okay, so I'm not completely uh, knowledgeable on all this, but he did. He fled to Japan. He fled to Japan, and then when everything kind of like quelled down, he was like, "I'm gonna go back to Peru, but I'm gonna go through Chile." So he went to Chile, and then they requested, what do you call those, extradition? So he got extradited from Chile and brought to Peru.
Yeah,
Uh, there was a whole court system, and they sentenced him. I don't know how many. I don't know if he's gonna die in prison or if he's going to get out anytime soon, which would be really bad.
would be. Hope he rots in there. I tried to like understand the psyche of the majority of Peruvians that like voted for him and kind of like ignored, the terrible things that he did. And I guess like from what I understand, he did manage to really help Peru's economy in terms of like, um, working about like capitalism and whatnot, you know, um, and getting more people to work in jobs. So as long as the people were satisfied, um, they didn't maybe complain as much, or perhaps they did, but they didn't make it an effort to like protest and have him, you know, ousted. So,
One of the tactics that he has and that his daughter adopted is giving little gifts to people, to communities, especially around the time of election. When they want to be elected, they will give out little gifts. They will give out like truckloads of rice and potatoes and beans. Well, that's not true. Peruvians don't really eat beans, but they do give out a bunch of like food, right? Uh, because they have a little interest and they want that to be met, and that's what he did. That's what Fujimori did. I remember when I was living there like many years ago. They brought like books and PE attire for schools, which at that particular specific moment it seems like, whoa, like things are really progressing and this is really nice, this is really positive, and my outlook of this president is really good. But it's kind of like putting a band-aid over like a huge gush of a wound, right? You need a whole operation. You don't need a band-aid. Like putting little band-aids on needs of the people gets him elected, but it doesn't solve the long-term problems in the country. And specifically like, okay, you open the market, so but which companies, which people, which types of people are benefiting the most, from this open market, from just opening the country to different companies and all that, like which groups of people uh, are really really feeling the positive effect of that. I think when you like dig or analyze that, you can say like, yeah, well, it was good government, but it wasn't like great. Um, and a lot of like major stuff did not get resolved, but rather actually it made things worse. Like his constitution, I think Alex earlier said that his constitution allows Congress to do something to the president. One of those things is his constitution eradicated um, a Senate, because there used to be a House of Representatives in Congress and a House of Senate. What they did is they eliminated the senators and instead they created, well, I don't know if it was already in there, but they created this branch called the Constitutional Tribune, which is basically kind of like a Senate, but like much smaller, of like 7 people. And they have the same similar functions as the Senate, but the difference is that the people that occupy the spaces of those minister or what did I say, constitutional ministries or something, constitutional, I forgot what I just said, but it has a name. The people that are occupying those employments are people that are elected in Congress. So you have they created this sort of situation where the people in Congress appoints the people that are going to represent the people in the Constitutional Tribune. Okay, there it is, Constitutional Tribune, which is so dumb, right? The people in Congress elect the people that form the Constitutional Tribune. What ends up happening is there's a lot of favors and bribery. Elect me, and whatever your political organization does, we're not going to question it. Or if we are, we're going to vote for it or not undermine the decisions or the things that you guys do. So you create this sort of uh, camaraderie between corrupt people where they owe each other favors for me electing you and putting you in the Constitutional Tribune, right? So that's why a lot of like the 2019 shit that other countries would have been like, oh hell no, let's call everybody into Congress and let's hold everybody accountable for what happened minute by minute in Congress versus the executive branch that day. where it felt more like a telenovela or like the climax of a action movie. That didn't happen because people that are appointed to the Constitutional Tribune are appointed by the people in Congress, so they don't have the incentives to look out for the little guy, for the commonwealth, for the interests of the commonwealth.
You make an interesting point, just like rewinding a little bit what you said on like how they kind of win other politicians over by giving them little gifts, right? Because uh, I mean, maybe this happens in more countries than I know, but I know like in China, I've spent some time there, and I understand that that's also what they do too, is they give them nice little gifts, like to win over like some politicians or getting some money and whatnot. um, so it's fun that happens also in Peru as well. Um, I
Um,
think
I think what you're saying is super interesting, and I kind of just wanted to add some of the stuff, some of the consequences of his constitution, his new constitution that he influenced to create back in 2009, I mean 1993 or 95 or even 98. I'm not quite sure, to be honest. But it's in the 90s, and so one of the consequences is that they don't have a Senate, and another consequence is that it gives Congress a lot of power, a lot of more power perhaps than the executive branch. So for that, because of that bestowment of power onto Congress, they have this sort of mighty outlook to question just about anything that the executive does, and you have so obstruction a, of government. Basically, you have consistent obstruction of government when the needs of the majority in Congress are not met. They will obstruct, they will call into question just about anything and create this sort of like narrative of something is not going right, and then eventually, just kind of like a snake when it's attacking its prey, they will jump with a with I think, I don't know what is the legal term, but basically they request to get one of the ministers fired, let go. There is like a terminology for that in the political sphere. But they do that, so they will like start with calling you into question or making comments, and then boom, they will call you out and call you into Congress, and then basically try to get them fired or changed for a different one. That's why, in addition to six presidents that we've had over the past 5 years, we have also had many cabinets, dude. Oh my God, so many cabinets since 2020. Cabinets, there have been more cabinets than there have been presidents, because one president will go through three, four different cabinets until Congress is satisfied with the cabinet that they have.
that's pretty
So
insane.
quite bad. It's quite bad, dude.
Yeah.
Let's see what Alex says. Alex says you can see this in how his daughter was covered. Oh, but he says, but the media is owned. Do you want to go into the media? Because I have some things to say on the media.
Yeah, we can talk about the media. I think I wanted to add just one last thing, and it was interesting to me that he said that like Fujimori's constitution allowed Congress to recall the president. How like destructive do you think that is for like the country to where they have a Congress that can just remove a president almost at will? I
Um,
I feel like
re-
Fujimori just didn't really care about the. You're gonna say something?
oh, I'm so sorry. I kind of jumped in too soon.
You're good. You
Let
can
me,
say what you're gonna say.
let me finish your thought, and then I'll go. Sorry.
I, I feel like deep down he truly didn't care about the country at all. He probably just did this just to, get some extra money and have some sort of legacy that he would leave, even though at the end it wasn't really good for the Peruvian people because there's still protests. There's still a good amount of the population that is going through a food crisis. There's still a lot of people that don't have jobs. So in the end, I don't think he cared that much for the country. hence why he's in house arrest.
Yeah. So I would like to go in and further that idea that you were saying about what Alex said, which is that Fujimori's constitution allows Congress to recall the sorry the president for moral cause. Yes, and they did that. They literally did that. They did that twice. They did it for Vizcarra. They vacated him. Okay, they impeached him because of because of a moral cause. With morality, you know how morality can be very subjective. So whatever little narrative they create and they get a lot of people on board to go with that narrative, most likely they will succeed with that. Um, and you will find little opposition. So it was done with Vizcarra. He was impeached and thrown away. At least he didn't go to jail. So it happened with him. They did it with him. But with Castillo, it was harder because it was the start of the year of his presidency, um, and he didn't have the difference is because Castillo didn't have any like prior experience as a politician. He was literally, I think, he came from the teaching elementary school. He joined that political party, and the political party decided to launch him in as a candidate. And then he just randomly won, basically, because he was the best option other than Fujimori. Um, and that's how he ended up in as a president. They couldn't find because he didn't have like a lot of background experience that these evil people could use against him. They kind of waited and waited and waited until they started questioning like everything he did. Like he could not do nothing worth shit. Like he was consistently obstructed. His ministers from day one were obstructed. And you have this guy who has very little political experience, who's being influenced left and right, these people and these people. And just imagine poor President Castillo just trying to make the most objective decisions based on like this and this and these people telling him this, and he has no experience going into the job of what it means to be a president or what it means to go into Congress and argue for a case or something like that. So they literally found this, like, I would say I'm waiting to the day that they take him to trial, but it's a very manufactured or fabricated um, uh, accusation they made against them, and they ran with it. They ran with it until they got him. They got the votes and they got him out. But it's because he didn't know how to play the game. Because what he was supposed to do was to take. So in Peru, I don't know how everything exactly works, but I do know that in Peru, you can. This is what you can do to shut down the Congress, right? If you're trying to pass an amendment, it's called a referendum, I mean, or something like that. Uh, you can take it to Congress. Congress has to give an approval of that. They call it a vote of confidence. Back in 2019, they taken it to Congress two times, and both times was rejected. So if they reject it a third time, then the president, the executive branch, has the opportunity to shut down Congress and call for new election, because there's no agreement. Because there's no agreement in this referendum that they're trying to pass, the executive can do that. So back in 2019, it did happen, and right on the third rejection of the president's referendum is when Vizcarra shut down Congress, because they didn't give him the vote of confidence a third time. And when that happens, it means there is no agreement between the branches. Uh, there's no agreement between the branches, so the executive can shut them down. But what it means is just it leaves the executive vulnerable for whatever Congress is coming. With just a small reason and enough votes, they got Vizcarra, the new Congress got him kicked out. They got him out, and then they had Castillo out too. But what Castillo, being the new president, what he could have done is do the same thing, which is hold a referendum take it to Congress and have them give them their vote of confidence. And if Congress doesn't approve 3 times, then he could have shut them down. But he didn't do it because he didn't know, or there were other people advising him not to do it. But Congress right now has this sort of like in the ring sort of vibe about them. Like they're not working with executive for the opportunities and the dignities and the pursuit of happiness of the people. They're not doing that. They're going against the executive for their own interests, and this has been happening for a very very long time. Okay, I'm done.
Oh, you're good. Thanks for sharing that. Would you say that now, from my understanding, his political experience isn't as much as Fujimori's, correct? And other maybe presidents before him. So maybe because he
I'm so
didn't.
sorry. Repeat that one more time. I was reading Lego My Ego's comment.
Oh, oh, you're good. I was going to say, would you say that because maybe Fujimori, not Fujimori, Castillo's experience, political experience, isn't as much as like Fujimori's and other previous presidents? From what I understand, he didn't have as much experience. Could be the reason as to why he ended up in this predicament. Um, because I think Fujimori's much more experience than Castillo, despite her track record, right? In terms of politics and
Yeah.
administrative positions.
I think Fujimori was the old man Fujimori. He was a senator, I think, before he became a president.
Well, I'm talking about Keiko. Sorry.
Keiko, she has experience in the sense that she was her dad's first lady.
Yeah,
Pseudo
of course. Yeah, silly
pseudo Keiko.
question. I mean, I guess other presidents before um, Castillo and like maybe others that wanted to run for president. I mean, I think I read an article that Castillo didn't have as much political experience as others before him. Is what I was trying to make, the point I was trying to make as to why he ended up in that situation where, the Congress did get him before he got them. Trying to imagine what it would have been like if he would have liquidated Congress.
I mean,
Crazy.
Alex is saying that he did try to get Congress first, but I don't think he did it in a way. Or can you, Alex? I would kindly extend an invitation for you to. You don't have to be like on like live, but maybe you can hang out in the background. And it seems like you know about this stuff and you're interested, so that'd be kind of cool just to chat it up. But that what I'm trying to say is that Congress. Hey Marcus, would you could you remind me one more time about Fujimori, right?
Yeah, like why? I mean, now that I think about it, of course, her dad was the president, right? But why Pedro Castillo ended up in the position that is right now, uh, in terms of like trying to get rid of Congress and whatnot, is because he didn't have that much experience, right? Perhaps if he would have taken a different route, then he could have been able to rid himself of Congress, and he would still be president right now. But he didn't.
Yeah,
Made
from all the presidents, perhaps arguably, perhaps he was one of the least experienced
yes,
candidates and presidents. I think he literally came from the classroom to becoming a
yeah,
president.
the teacher.
Yeah, he was a teacher, but I mean the reason why, and but even the people who do have experience, it's not necessarily good because a lot of the people they're just really good at being corrupt and they stay there a while. And a lot of people, the instability of the government that doesn't allow consecutive presidents to stay for multiple, what do you call those? Multiple,
I know what you're talking about.
yeah, yeah,
Got them
office,
in mind too.
like multiple
Yeah,
terms.
terms. Yeah,
Uh, like it hasn't been the case, and I think I said this before that since 1820 there hasn't been more than 4 presidents have consecutive terms. Like it's usually like, okay, we'll have one president full term, second president full term, third president, it's getting dicey, full term, Fourth president, either the executive wants more power, Congress wants more power, or the military wants power. But since 1820, okay, all of you guys who are listening, since 1820, there have only been about four presidents that have had their full term completed consecutively, one president after another. Um, there hasn't been more than that, because every time when you get to the fourth president, something wrong happens. And the same thing happened with Fujimori. He was doing his second, I think, or his second term, and he wanted more power, and he went and he took over Congress. The same thing was happening. We were having and the consecutiveness of these presidents is in recent times, not even like back in 1890. No, this is like in the past 40 years, we've seen the consistency of presidents. Uh, and that was during the 2000s. We've had the most consecutive presidents who have been able to finish their term accordingly. Um, yeah. Can we read? Somebody said, Alex said, uh, the girl Fujimori, what's her name? Keiko Fujimori. She had the backing of the Fujimoris in the state and well organized party. I don't know about well organized, but yeah, they're well organized for doing evil and corruption, but out of not very much good at anything else. Teacher union leader. Oh, he was a teacher union leader. Whoa, that's cool.
Yeah, I think that's it kind of transitions well into like our next point of what you said is just like how politically unstable it is in Peru, unfortunately. Um, to have like good consecutive like presidents, um, with clean slates. But then again, no president has a completely clean slate, but in Peru it's a little bit different. Um, So I think, well, I guess I can answer Lego. Lego want to know what we were talking about. Yeah. So pretty much, no, it wasn't about Japan's hypocrisy with the colonialism. It was just about how Alberto Fujimori, was a bad president, and how Castillo kind of failed, not failed, I guess somewhat failed, but um, wasn't able to rid himself of Congress, oust Congress, and he ended up in jail. And now there's mass protests going on in Peru, and unfortunately, it doesn't look like the leadership can come up with any viable solutions. So now Moore and I are here discussing that, discussing the problems of Peru, kind of where it all started, and where we are today, and what solutions can come from this, which I believe there can be some. But yeah, I think we wanted to discuss the media, right? And when Moore and I were discussing like the media part of this video, in terms of like how we wanted to go about this more, you had said like, why is it that Peru and like South America do not get the type of attention that like China, Russia, Ukraine, and the issues in Israel like get in the U.S., right? And I think it is because like the U.S. sees China obviously as a threat in a way. The government does, um, because I stated in a previous video that we are essentially in some sort of like Cold War, right? If you look at all of the aspects of what happened with the previous Cold War, and if you check mark like all these things that are happening, it's very similar, right? In like a technological race, in terms of like creating AI, drones, other advanced technologies. So yeah, so we're in our own little issue. China, obviously, most people know what's going on in Russia, in Ukraine, and I think a good amount of people know of what's going on in Israel as well, and the issues going on in the Middle East, and all three of those um, areas uh, cause a significant amount of like discomfort and worry to the U.S. government, and South America does not. Peru does not. Um, it's in. the U.S.'s backyard. Um, I feel like our government has a pretty good grasp of a lot of, um, I guess, understanding of the countries, and in a way their own like control, right? I mean, our government's been responsible for coups, um, helping extremist governments, dictatorships out with weapons, with eliminating political oppositions, and so yeah, the U.S. isn't too concerned about what's going on in its backyard. So that's why we don't really see much in the media. So I hope I explained my point well in terms of why we don't see these protests too much, why you don't hear about protests in Colombia, right? Like literally all the news that I heard about what was going on in Colombia when they had those big protests was like through Instagram. It wasn't happening like elsewhere, right? Like you didn't see it too much in um, CNN or Fox News, right, or MSNBC. They're too busy discussing other things that are going on in other parts of the world. Um, so yes, that's why we do not see it as much. So yeah, more. I
Yeah,
think
can I say that I also feel like there's very little coverage of like Peru's major events in news outlets. Usually I see them like in huge like international worldly news, but I don't necessarily see it like in freaking NBC or ABC or Fox News. Like I don't see it like that. So in that sense, I'm like, it's kind of. But a lot of stuff in Brazil does show up here. Like that's how I know the Bolsonaro is. He was like anti-mask and vax too, I think, and a lot of people were like against him, and so you get coverage like that, but like there's very little coverage of what's happening in countries like Peru, and I don't really feel like I want to speculate why. I mean, I have some ideas, but I don't really want to go into it. But it's kind of true. Like, it's not very well covered. Maybe because there's not a lot of Peruvian population here. Or you know, I don't know. But we can also talk about how the media in the Peruvian media portrays, you know, the issue the issue of the country, how see that's good, how the Peruvian media portrays the issue of the country to its own people, and how they portray um, candidates to the presidency or political parties.
yeah, you know, that's a great point you brought up more, and I think that I like obviously like a lot of the media is bought out by those of the elite in Peru, right? And the Peru elite really are on the side of the protest, or Castillo for that matter. So you're going to see the media lie in one direction, and that is somewhat of an oppositional direction towards protest, right? Um, Towards the rights of those that are in like the lower class. Um, would you agree with that more? I mean, I think I've heard this before where, yeah, most of the media is bought out by the rich upper elite. So there's going to be a biased coverage of the protests. There's going to be a biased coverage of Castillo himself, right? And how he is in jail.
Yeah, so I think I would have to ask for receipts, you
Sure.
know, and and in order to provide receipts, and for me it's a little bit more difficult, but what I can do is sort of talk about what I've seen and what I can sort of perceive, which is basically that the media, and I think it goes hand in hand what you are saying. I just don't necessarily have the evidence to say, yeah, this is true. But what I have noticed when you look at like the media output of news, what you do notice is that there is no intentional analysis and consciousness and self-awareness and metacognition of what is happening in the country. And there's like almost this sort of like intentional avoidance of deeper analysis to really understand the major issues that need to be addressed. For example, during the most recent protests, what was happening is like these people are covering the protests as if it was a freaking football match. They were like, oh, and here this person comes. Oh, and the police is doing this. Oh, like look at this. Like, no shit. Like I can see it. I can see the video. You don't need to narrate it to me as if it was a soccer match. So that's their level of covering national issues that affect the people's livelihood and their dignity and their pursuit of happiness and their pursuit of just having a dignified life, which is just ignoring the major issues and the major problems. They're covering it like as if it was a football match, you know. But do you have a set of hosts that are analyzing, the issue? Why, how, when, where did it all begin? How can we change this? Not that I know of, not that I've been like, and I've been doing a bit of investigation, and there hasn't been like deep analysis like that. Yeah.
Yeah, it is pretty crazy how they cover it like a soccer match, right? Like, as this seems like it's not even taken as seriously in a way.
So exactly. So that's exactly the effect that happens, that when you have media companies, Peruvian media companies, that intentionally stay away or sway away, swerve from the major issues and major events, what ends up happening perhaps is that people don't quite understand the issue at hand, and that thing that we all have in common. Um, and and it kind of makes light of what's really happening and why people are literally dying in a protest. It diminishes the value of the spirit of what people are trying to do when these media outputs are not covering when they're covering it at the level of a football game, or when they don't go beyond that. It creates this problem. I think I also want to add, like when they were covering Castillo and Keiko Fujimori, I think that equating their method, what their method was to try to not get Castillo elected, because Castillo, let's remind the audience that Castillo, during his election, he basically was shouting out really crazy shit. Like he was saying, like, we're gonna nationalize this and nationalize that, and we're going to kick this company out, and we're going to distribute wealth, and we're going. So he was sounding quite communist, like a communist, and people were like becoming outraged. There was like, holy shit, like if this guy wins, we're going to turn into a communist party. So they took the narrative and they expanded on that. And what they did, their tactic to not get Castillo elected was equating him to Keiko. They equated everything that he did as if he was on par with her, when we know that she is the one with more experience, when she's the one with more shady actions. She has a bunch of lots and acres purchased in the deserts of Peru, where she has like storage facilities. We don't know what the hell she's storing in there. She has like acres and acres with her under her husband's name of property in facilities around the outskirts of Lima. They don't give account for that. They say, oh, because Mark is the name of her husband, because he's an investor. He invested in this. He doesn't do anything else. He just does that. He just shadows her. And but what I'm trying to say is that their tactic was to equate Castillo to her, so that way he can also get that sort of negative view. Because every Peruvian knows that, or most Peruvians know that Keiko Fujimori is a shady lady, and that she's done some shady things, and that there are things that are not accounted for. And when you equate Castillo to her, you're basically making him seem as if he was as shady as her, when in reality he was never shady. Was he maybe not quite knowledgeable of what to say and how to structure his presidency, absolutely. But so far there hasn't been like, or if there has, somebody needs to point it out to us, that definitive proof why he should be in jail. Why is he even in jail right now? He's literally in jail, in prison, because he tried to shut down Congress. But he was doing what the people wanted him to do. And that's what people still want to happen. They want Congress to be shut down. Hold on. Alex says, oh, we already read that, huh? Both my Peruvian media. They called him a terrorist, called him Hugo Chavez. Yeah, so what ends up happening is that I think that a lot of, generational wealth that has been accumulated through many years led up to the wealthiest being the people that are descendants from the landowners, from the plant owners, from these more Hispanic backgrounds. So those are the people that kind of like historically most likely have benefited from generational wealth, where they end up having media outlets, purchasing media companies like Latina, for example, or there are other channels that are Peruvian based, right? So you have those people, uh, and they don't necessarily identify themselves as indigenous or natives, but rather they are Latinos or Hispanics, um, and they won't they won't necessarily identify with the tribal people of the deep jungle. They won't necessarily identify with the high Andean people that are trying to sustain their culture, even in 2023. Like, they don't see themselves necessarily as part of that group. It's like us and them, like, and there's a divide. So in that sense, uh, when you see television programs, um, every or most of the population of Peru is not necessarily reflected in the programming of these television companies. And you know that representation is everything. And if they are represented, like, okay, you will have a native representative represented in television, but it will most likely be in a comical sense, maybe in a comic skit where you invite the jungle man and make some jungle incoherent uh, uh, misconceptions, and people find that funny. Or you'll have the high Andean woman or man with their thick accent come down from the mountain onto the city. So in that sense, they might be represented, but it hardly goes beyond that sort of representation and reflection of the people in the deep jungle, the people in the high Andes. Um, so so I guess what I'm trying to say is that there is, I think there is a consciousness divide between who these media companies want to be and who they want, or what their audience really is. I think if they would take a rhetoric class, they would probably fail because they don't know their audience. Their audience, 80, I think 75% of the Peruvian population, they're brown Americans who are descendants from 5,000-year-old people. There is maybe 10, oh, maybe you can pull it up. There's only like about 20 or 13% that have direct connect, or like mostly 50% of or more of like Latino, Spanish Latino descendants and bloodline. But most of the people in Peru are native.
I'd say it's like 90%.
Yeah, more than 50% of their genealogy is native.
Yeah.
So know your audience, dude. Know your freaking audience. They need to like represent the people that populate the country.
Yep. I
Well,
agree with you.
so that's what that's my 2 cents on the media. What do you think?
I definitely think that, like, I think it's funny that you brought up like the rhetoric, right? Like the test on how most would kind of like fail, right?
Oh yeah, oh yeah, yeah. Like the genealogy, the test to see like your percentage of what you are. Yeah.
Mm. Well, I was referring to something else, but it's okay.
Oh my bad. Sorry.
No, you're good. You're good. Yeah, I feel that there really isn't a lot of good representation in terms of like having those elected leaders like really follow through on what the people want. I think there needs to be more. Um, do I think that Castillo should have um, shut down Congress? I think that I don't know that I think he could have went about it in a different way to where he could have. I liked your approach more. Like he should have asked Congress first, right, and then wait for him to deny it, his request, and then perhaps he could do something. I mean, ultimately, though, we have to see like, do the majority of the people want Congress gone? Like, obviously, there's protesters, right? Like, do the majority of Peruvians feel that like if Castillo would have shut down Congress in its entirety, would that have benefited most Peruvians? Because I
I
feel like the news really demonized Castillo for that. Sorry.
um, you're absolutely right. They effed him up by comparing him and equating him to Keiko. And I think it would have benefited to a certain degree. Again, I think that there are levels of speaking about Peruvian issues and Peruvian concerns, and there are these what I call immediate issues, the ones that are happening recently, even today, and what's happening. But there are like historical issues that don't necessarily get addressed, and I think this is one of them. Is that there is just such disapproval of it, of the government, that that okay, you have Castillo shut down Congress, call into election a new set of congressmen and women. They would have come in, and I can almost guarantee you they would have vacated him. They would have impeached Castillo, just like the new Congress vacated and impeached Vizcarra. They would have done the same thing. So what I'm trying to say is like you can take many little different solutions to the problem, right? Like you put a band-aid over this rash scar that you have, or wound that you have, right? You put a band-aid, but the band-aid is not going to be enough. Like sometimes you need an operation. And I think that metaphorically speaking, I think that the Peruvian government needs an operation, ASAP. Not band-aids, not pills and potions to make them feel better. We don't need that. We don't, that's not what the people need. The people are looking for long term solutions that are going to change their lives for a very long time in a positive way, not just now, not just shut down Congress. Let's call an election and let's get another Congress that is going to be as terrible, if not worse, than the previous Congress. That is going to actually also vacate and impeach the next president. Like that's not what they need. That's not what they shouldn't get. What they need is a long-term solution, and stop trying to fix things with little gifts. Like when they run for president, a lot of what they like to do is give gifts. Like they give like just food. Like here's another comment by Ralphie.
Thanks.
I think I recognize that name. He says 30% of Peruvian mestizos consider themselves Euro mestizos, and 15% mestizos consider themselves Afro mestizos. Yeah, and I think, thank you, Ralph, for bringing that up, because I think um, when you analyze deeper and deeper, I think what it comes down to is yes, you have corruption and terrible infrastructure and all this terribleness of what happens in the country, but I think underlining all of that are like, I think people's identity, their own identity is so messed up because erasure from history, books have been erased, languages have been erased, people and communities have been erased. um, so the consciousness, the continuous consciousness of a group of people that have been living there for about 5,000 years in that region of Peru, which is the coast of Peru in the north and the south. People have been living there for the past 5 to 6,000 years ago. So the continuation of their consciousness was interrupted by this major event that is, cultures meeting, different cultures, two cultures meeting, and one culture imposing itself over the other culture, as and becoming dominant or mainstream over the second country, the second culture. That event, I think it caused some sort of minor amnesia, minor forgetfulness of identity, and in addition to the poor education, poor distribution of wealth, when you have all those elements, it's almost like you're cooking a stew, right? You're making stew. You have different ingredients, and what you end up having is just this sort of very abstract yet real, um, real uh, consequence or effect. I mean, real effect as to why um, corruption might be happening, because people don't identify themselves as brown or as native. They will identify themselves as like Latino or European, even as crazy as that may sound, you
Yeah.
know. And so what ends up happening, if I can continue, is that when somebody like that is elected into Congress, they don't have that sort of connection. Like, okay, I am a Congress, and I came from that tribe, or I came from that community, and the people, and I'm going to represent them for their needs. That usually doesn't happen. What ends up happening is like, oh, I got elected as congressman. Now I'm going to make deals with other political parties so that I can get a chunk of money or some sort of bribery, because it's not always money. It's some crazy shit also that they give each other favors, maybe position, some position in the government or something like that. But but that's what ends up happening, that the people don't identify themselves from where they came from, so they don't necessarily have the need to represent them and to look out for their best interest, which is basically what they were hired to do, which is to look out for the best interest of the people that you represent. So that doesn't happen. And so you have, because you don't have that, then you have corruption, right? People who are interested more on themselves and enriching themselves. You have corruption in every aspect of government. You have corruption in Congress, the judicial branch, and the executive branch. It's a different type of corruption, but you have them in all those. Hey, you know what? That actually kind of ties into our. Oh no, never mind. That was a previous topic. But yeah, Ralph says, according to Peruvian historian, during the first half of the 20th century, about 60% of Peruvian population spoke Quechua. Yeah, and a lot more probably before then, but that's what happens, Broski. Now, what do you think, Marcus? In terms of our agenda, we got some. What can be done to change the coverage?
Yeah.
That's still under media, or do you want to go on to our last Roman numeral?
I think, well, first I want to address what you said more, and you made some really good points. And I think that, yeah, how do I say it? I guess I would say, the history of Peru and the land itself goes back over hundreds and thousands of years, right? And then what happened with colonization, and then fast forward with the advancement of technology, and move to the 20th century with change in transportation, media, and whatnot. We kind of A lot of us maybe forgot who we are, like you said, right? Um, and I think that from what my friend said, and she spent many years in Peru, she said that many people in Peru now are kind of realizing, that they are like brown Americans or Peruvians or people of the Americas, right? Realizing that they are the people of this continent. Um, so I think there is some solace to this. Um, Despite like the massive changes that's happened, right? And perhaps with this awakening, if you will, a reawakening, um, it can bring about positive change and maybe some sort of unity as well, you know? Because as Ralph said here, it was only during the first half of the 20th century. So that wasn't that long ago, where, yeah, 60% of the population spoke Quechua. That's quite a lot of the population. I mean, honestly, Quechua should be an official language of Peru, but you know, it's not. Um, so I believe that if more people can like come together and realize, who we are, um, then I think there can be good change, which transitions into the media coverage and uh, better representation for the needs of the people of Peru. I wanted to read a comment really quick. Um, Sorry, we're going to say something more.
No, I said, yeah, which comment do you want to read?
Someone said things are still going on in South America and the continent itself with Western passport bros. They're too stupid to understand.
Wait, oh, he said a lot of things are still happening in South America and the American continent itself, while the Western passport bros are to understand. Yeah, I
I've
agree.
seen videos of like American men just like going to Colombia, right? Not so much Peru, but Colombia, and just like I don't know, going about their business. So I feel like perhaps that portion of people don't really have that much of a good like understanding of like what's really happening in South America, particularly in Colombia. But I mean, I wouldn't expect them to. There's a reason why they're in Colombia. Anyway, so I think, yeah, we wanted to like move on to like the final part, which I was kind of like discussing, right? And I think what Moore and I really wanted to get out was like solutions, right? Um, and I think using Chat GTP and cloud to discuss like some current issues that are going on, and more. I'm not sure like which one we wanted to discuss first. Perhaps that could be like the poverty in Peru and like the equity assessment, right? Where I think you had Cloud summarize this article.
Oh, yes, yes, yes. Okay, so, but this one doesn't necessarily give out a solution, but rather kind of just states what's happening in Peru. This is the one about poverty, right? Well, it's just kind of just more eloquently states, why Peru's population. Sorry, I'm looking. This is food. Then we looked at poverty. Peru's most hardest, highest mortality rates. Economic impact. Sorry, yeah, some Peru's paralyzed extreme political fragmentation. Some Peru's exports to other industries like construction articles. Okay, sorry. I think it was this one, which is basically in summary. Peru experienced severe health and economic impact from COVID 19, which erased many years of social progress and gains in poverty reduction. Widespread informality and inadequate social protections left many workers vulnerable to job losses and income drops. Government stimulus, while substantial, could not prevent poverty returning to pre 2010s level, especially among marginalized people. So basically, high informality and limited protections left many workers vulnerable, and they got COVID 19, and many of them died. Uh, Despite the substantial government response, which was basically lockdown, Peru responded to COVID 19 by locking everyone down and sending military tanks to the streets to patrol and make sure that everybody was inside. So that's how they handled that. Um, Despite social gains achieved in the 2000s were eroded, revealing the fragility of progress made before the pandemic. Yeah, that's absolutely true, right? I mean, we already talked about it. Fragility has been there since 1820. When did you know that we didn't even have like for the first how many years of democracy we did not have presidents? We had Congress running everything, and then
Mhm.
we elected a president like later.
I was not aware of that.
Yeah. So I'm trying to say is that, yeah, is it fragile? Is our democracy fragile? Yes, fuck yeah, it is. Wait, can I say that? Oh god.
You could say it. It's okay. You can say what you want.
Another point is, while Peru's stimulus package was large, it was insufficient to prevent increased poverty, especially among vulnerable groups. Yeah, that makes sense. They gave him like enough for a week and expected that to solve all their problems, I guess. Huh?
Are you discussing the article? I just want to make sure we're on the same page more.
Yeah, yeah, I went over the points of the summary points of that article on poverty. Then
Yeah.
summary. I have, if you want, we can go over the deadly protests. Uh,
Yeah. The one by Reuters, or are we talking
uh,
about?
I'm not quite sure. I just copied and pasted the articles you sent me.
Okay.
And
Sure.
so here is one. I'll give the summary before I give you the main points. Okay, the summary. Why I think this is why Peru's Congress is so messy. I think this was the
Yeah. Let me share that one.
okay. Peru's Congress is paralyzed by extreme political fragmentation and inability to compromise. This prevents agreement on snap elections despite widespread protests and violence after Castillo's removal. Fragment impeachments against presidents also showcase the legitimate dysfunction, as consensus maintains elusive public disillusionment with Congress has grown significantly. I don't think I read that right. As consensus remains elusive, public disillusionment with Congress has grown significantly. See, notice how this American article even points this disillusionment of Congress. Congress is what's happening now. It's not good. Congress is really not doing their job. Not that we don't want to have Congress, right? We want that branch to do its job. But when you have a Congress that doesn't do its job, and when it does it targeted only for obstructing other branches' jobs, then yeah, He said, question for the panel in regards to preserving the Quechua language and the culture within the highlands, what can one do, especially for the people living in the United States? Okay, that's a whole question altogether, which is kind of fun, and I want to talk about it. But before we move on, what do you think about this article, Marcus?
I think it's kind of, I mean, it really highlights the insanity of what the Congress has like tried to do in terms of like trying to get rid of Castillo like multiple times and how they pretty much have unlimited power to get rid of whoever they don't like, right? That sounds insane. I actually don't know how the disapproval rate of Congress isn't higher from the Peruvian people, how they think that's normal. In my eyes, it's not. I think something needs to be done. Does it need to go to the extreme of shutting them down completely? Maybe, but I don't know what you think more. I think I think the article really highlights the points of, yeah, just how crazy Peruvian politics are, right? And just not only the insanity of politics, but just how that really affects the average Peruvian person, right? Like you have politicians arguing and like, oh, I don't want to spend money here. Oh, we're going to get rid of you. Um, but they really should be focusing their time on the Peruvian people and those in less fortunate areas in the highlands and the rural sides of Peru. But no, they're too busy arguing and not getting anything done, right? Um, so that shows you a lot, and I can understand, like to an extent, like why Castillo um, did wanted to do what he had planned on. Again, didn't work.
Yeah, absolutely, dude. Um, yeah, the political sphere is quite fragmented,
Yes.
as this article states. I think there are maybe 15 political parties. Out of those 10, 15, I think 6 or 7 are in Congress. For those people that are not quite acquainted, in Peru we don't have like a binary political system. We have just a bunch of groups that represent different ideas. We don't have like Democrats and Republicans. So we don't have something like that. So you have like 10 different political parties that come together. Some of them have six. Some political parties have 6 people in them representing that political party in Congress, and uh, so there are many problems there because it's really hard for them to come to consensus and agree upon, okay, this is the issue and this is how we're going to solve things. Because there are so many tiny political parties, uh, they want to invite other tiny political parties to vote for whatever this other party is proposing. So when that happens, it's like, okay, hey, can you vote for my bill and we'll do you this favor? Or like it's a lot of, again, scheming and 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 just plotting, a lot of scheming and plotting, who's gonna vote for what, or which bill is going to get the most votes, which political party is going to it's a lot of like turns and favors, uh, to get something passed. Um, and not only that, but on top of that you have the president of Congress, right? I don't know if that's the same way here, but the president, I think here is the House Speaker is equivalent to the president of Congress in Peru. The House Speaker usually has the power to like kind of focus which conversations are going to be held or which things are going to be debated in the plenum, right? But in Peru, it's is the Congress president, and sometimes these Congress presidents, they don't want to address the main issues at hand. They just go astray, and a lot of the main issues they don't get addressed quickly as they should. Okay, so Peru made a new constitution. Peru needs a new constitution. What would it look like for you? Oh my God, this is Alex and Ralph E. Such a really good questions. But so back to this. Can I say one last thing about this? Uh, is it Can you believe that Keiko Fujimori, she was not elected by anyone, okay? Keiko Fujimori was not elected by anyone. Rather, she was rejected during the elections. This little lady uh, is able to have an influence uh, in government and government proceedings and bills without having been elected or without holding a public governmental position. I do we have that? I mean, besides kinds of entities, do we have like a Democrat leader who's not in the Democratic, who's not in Congress, but nevertheless has major stake in political affairs and political in bills? Do we have one for Republicans that are not in the I mean, they're in the party, but they don't practice it by being in Congress? Do we have that here? Because, and that question doesn't necessarily need to be answered, but the reason why I'm saying that is because Keiko, this little lady, she does not work for the government to represent people. She owns a political party, which is Popular Force. She owns it and she runs it, yet she was not elected by any. How can you not be elected for anybody but yet have decision making power that affects people's livelihood, such as passing bills and holding people accountable? How does that even work? Like, you have not been elected by anyone, you own a political party, uh, and you have the power to influence the journey of politics from your headquarters. And so when there are consequences to some of these acts, she can't be tried as a political person. Do you see the problem? Like Vizcarra, the last president, he was tried like a political entity, right? So he was disabled, or he's not able to to be in the government, to hold a government position for the next 10 to 9 years, because he was held on trial as a as a government person. Keiko, if her political party does what have been doing, which is holding private chats through WhatsApp, talking about how they're going to vote and talking about how they're going to do all this, but no, like, they don't call her into, like, hey, respond to these messages. Why did Because she doesn't have a position in Congress, so they can't call her out. And if they can't, they don't want to. How is that even possible? I don't understand how you can have. Okay, somebody says meanwhile, and we had a lot of drama. So do you want to add anything to that, Marcus? Because I kind of want to answer some Ralph's question about Quechua and about the new constitution.
Oh, no, actually, you can actually go ahead and answer the question, so they could be fresh in your mind. I'll talk probably after.
Okay, so I'll turn on my camera since your camera's off.
Oh,
Hi, everyone. Okay, so here we go. Question for panel. It says, in regards to preserving the Quechua lengua and the Andean culture within the highlands, what can one do specifically for the people living in the United States? Uh, for the people living in the United States, I would say subscribe to the YouTube channels, news outlets, and analyze what's really being said. Just stay tuned. That's how I do it. I have a bunch of subscriptions, and so I can say, like, hey, these people are not covering this, or they're not seeing it under this light. So I think being subscribed, or just go to Peru and travel. Just go there and visit. That you can do that. I'm actually. Can I, Marcus? Can I give a shout out to my channel? Actually, never mind, because
sure.
I'm
Yeah.
going to start a new one. But I do have a channel where I try to do what I'm doing now, um, and come up with like solutions, ideas, or things like that we can work with. Uh, but in terms of the lengua Quechua, the Quechua language, let's see. I think maybe it needs to be studied in depth. There are syntactical constructions, there are semantical structures already in place. Um, it does have the need to incorporate a foreign language because Quechua is not currently up to par to what's happening technologically. So there are a lot of words that when you hear a Quechua speaking person speak, a lot of them will will do what do you call it? But will have incorporate Spanish words into their Quechua because there are some Quechua words that don't have a one-to-one translation to some of the stuff that we have here now in 2023. So you'll find that uh, the only, I guess the only criticism, see, and we're allowed to do. I think we're allowed to be self-critical of our own culture, and I think one criticism that I would have against Quechua and against the idea of like restoring it would be that Quechua is quite lengthy. Like it's kind of like Spanish. Like to say something short, it requires a lot of syllables. And I don't know if that's good or bad. Like it takes a lengthier time to say something in Quechua and in Spanish than to say it in English, for example. So I'm not sure if I want to promote that. I'm not sure if I want to promote. And at the end of the day, dude, like if you really trying to like seek out like who am I really, or like trying to stay connected to your ancestry roots, like Quechua, I mean, language changes. Like you do know that the English that we speak now is not the English that we spoke like 1,000 years ago. There's old English that sounded way more Germanic. There's Middle English that sounded just a little bit more like how we sound today. And what we speak today is modern English. Now, this is Shakespeare speaks modern English, so that's not that's not old English. Okay, so Shakespearean English is not old English. Old English sounds like German. It's very ancient. So what I'm trying to say is that language changes, right? So it's inevitable that a language will change. Now, how economically reasonable is it and for a country to invest resources to going back to a language like that needs to pair up with a different language so that it can convey a full meaning? I don't know. That sounds really risky. That sounds like doing a lot. You know what I mean? Um, but what I'm trying to say is like if you're trying to find some really meaningful experience about who you are and your identity, I would say like just look within yourself because who we are maybe more than our language, maybe more than because you think about like I don't know if you like if you're Peruvian and you have like family Peruvian family that are born there or that are from there, a lot of them will be sad and curse the day that the foreigners came and took the gold and took the silver. Like a lot of them will be really in their feelings about that. But my question is, are we our resources? Is that who we make us as people, or is there something more substantial than gold and silver? Like in the face of being completely um, robbed of our possessions, basically, right? Who are we really? So I think maybe it's a question to really ask yourselves: who are you really beyond your little garments and your feathers and your gold and your silver and your neck piece and your bracelets? Who are we as people? Because inevitably we have been led to ask that question. If we're robbed from our garments, from our gold and silver and all these material things, it calls into question then who are we really? Like what is substantial about being ourselves, you know? So in that sense, maybe you can move on beyond this narrative of let's go back to the old language or damn those foreigners for taking our gold. Yes, it's very crappy, but we have to find a way to reconcile that fact. Do you want to add something to that, Marcus?
Yeah. I mean, I think You brought up some great points more. And I think that in terms of addressing Ralphie's question, right? Which is like, if we want to preserve like Quechua language, and, Indian culture, yeah, what can we do? Well, I think for Peruvians, they might know more than myself. I mean, those living in Peru, right? Supporting, causes, supporting, well, indigenous causes are those organizations that want to preserve like language, right? I think that there's probably a lot of those in Lima and probably Cusco as well, other major cities. Now, if you're an American in the U.S., then yeah, that's a bit of a different story. But I like what you said more about like supporting like YouTube channels, like subscribing to them, finding online organizations. If you have Peruvian friends that know about assisting like in the preserving like the Quechua, right, or other native languages to Peru. Sorry, then I don't think it's too hard to find those organizations, or just maybe make time to maybe one day go to Peru and try to seek out help or assistance. I think it really helps. So if you have friends that have knowledge of Peruvian history and the language, and those that help out in organizations as well, I think that can be a major plus in terms of what you want to get out of this, right? In terms of preserving this language.
Yeah, I think like organizations can probably, fund it privately, can probably seek out to preserve the language and the people who speak it. Um, yeah, and you know what? Somebody, I think Lego Maego said, the English has a lot of native words as well. Yeah, that's actually mind opening. I didn't know that indigenous couple of indigenous American language influenced by a couple of indigenous American language. Yeah, probably like the name, some of the names that we have for animals or places, um, could probably have indigenous influence. I don't know about like if you're writing a scientific piece, how much of an indigenous influence could you have on the piece or a scientific piece? You know what I mean? Like, but if you're talking about like the territory, this and the people that, you can probably incorporate or enlighten me with which words in the English language are derived and that we use in our day-to-day lives that are derived from American Indian people or in languages. I would love to know that.
Or I think another good option would be to, find teachers that teach Quechua, right? They probably know a lot of information in terms of like who they can connect you to support organizations that are doing their best to preserve this language, right? And surely there's Quechua teachers in the United States that you could find, or through connections of your friends as well. I think that's a good option.
Marcus, there is. I just kind of want to make you aware that I do want to address this question by someone. They said if Peru needs a new needs a new constitution, what would it be like for y'all? Eventually, I would love to go into that, and maybe that could be like our closing um, Roman numeral because it goes
Sure.
to the idea of like solutions.
Yeah. Who left that comment? I'm trying to search for it.
Alex.
Alex. Okay. Cool.
So if you
Okay.
want to
The two
start
comment.
off, or if whatever, it's whatever.
If I want to what? I'm sorry.
If
Couldn't.
you want to start us off, or if you want me to start us off, it's up to you.
Sure. Yeah. What would that look like? Well, mhm. I'm in the U.S., so it's a little bit different. But obviously, I care a lot about what happens in Peru. I think a new constitution would definitely have to be put in place if all the people of Peru are to benefit, right? I mean, let's be honest. Let's look at the track record of Peruvian politicians, those in Congress, previous presidents as well. It's not the greatest, right? Look at how many protests are going on in the country. Look at the wealth, the unequal distribution of wealth, I should say. It's not good. The country itself is not investing enough in technology and agricultural, um, not infrastructure, but just agriculture in general, right? Moore had brought up earlier that I think in a previous video how they need to invest more in agricultural practices, right? Because Peru has a lot of food that they could still, distribute, to Peruvian people, other countries as well. Um, so I think that there's a lot that could be done with a new constitution having better equal representation of rural communities of different places, different cities, and whatnot in Peru, because clearly not all voices are being heard. I think that there's major issues, unfortunately, that presidents like Fujimori and others have left Peru, which are not good, for the people. I used to believe that maybe Peru kind of was not doomed, but was going to suffer a lot from the start, right? Since its inception, because since its inception, there was a lot of wealth from the criollos, as you say, or those that were of the elite that it was distributed amongst them, right? Amongst the higher ups, and much of the middle class and the lower class did not have that wealth at all, right? Unfortunately, a lot of hardships had to happen for a lot of the people in Peru to get where they are today from what happened. I mean, well, their descendants since the beginning of its independence, right? So I would say that a lot needs to be changed. And I think a new constitution could alleviate some of the problems that are happening now. I hope that was clear. More, maybe you want to add on to that.
Yeah, I absolutely want to add on that. I think, okay, what would a new Peruvian constitution want? Obviously, I think you would have to determine the audience of the constitution, the task, and the purpose of the constitution. Right? What is its purpose? What is it serving? I know that in the United States we have the Constitution, the American Constitution. We also have the Bill of Rights, right? So I think maybe we a constitution would probably have multiple functions, right? Its tasks probably informative, but also kind of, I don't know, just another task on top of that. Um, Argumentative, in a sense, it would be argumentative, right? Arguing that the people are born with a right to a dignified life, are born with a right to pursue happiness and to pursue a dignified life, that the people are entitled to education, and that the government should facilitate that. The people are entitled to a good infrastructure. So I think that the task of constitution would probably be argumentative and persuasive, in the sense that's trying to persuade lawmakers and all these people into what Peru really is, or the Peruvian people really deserve. So, but additionally, on top of that, I mean, just it's probably going to be a lengthy document where it outlines, some of the rules and procedures of the government, like how is the government going to run. There are a lot of procedures in the Constitution. It says, like, in the American Constitution, it tells you, like, how many congressmen there's supposed to be, how do they vote, every date, every so and so, they have to come together, and there are a lot of procedures that it lists. So likewise, I think that a Peruvian government should probably also have procedures, like, this is how the plenum is going to be held, or this is the rights of the ministers and what they can do, which already there is some of that already in there. But ultimately, I think, probably you want a self-regulating system. You probably want a system. You don't want to think of the Constitution as a document. If you think of it as a document, off the onset, you're dead wrong. Okay, if you think the Constitution is a document, you're wrong. Uh, the Constitution is not going to be a document. It's going to be a living organism that is changing according to its time. Uh, it should be self-conscious and self-regulating, so that no power can overcome the other. Okay, so there should be procedures for self-regulation, of this document called Constitution. That, I mean, you see it in a document, but it's really an organism that's alive and changing, and responding to its environment, the people who live in the United States, but, or I mean, in Peru. So definitely it has to be self-regulating. It would be a constitution that takes into account that there might be some corrupt people. So maybe allow whistleblowing, right? A law that if you whistleblow on some corruption, you're gonna be protected, and maybe that will incentivize the people to come out and say, like, hey, I was somebody was trying to bribe me, you know. Um, but overall, okay, let's see how else you can take this. Um, yeah, the Constitution has to be representative of the people. I think the consciousness of the Constitution has to be, or the spirit of the Constitution has to be one and the same as the spirit of the majority of the people that live there. Of the Commonwealth. It has to be the spirit of the people have to be the same spirit as the Constitution. So that way you won't have the issue of identity, like who am I and who am I representing? Like, when you have a clear constitution, and how that may look like, we're not sure. Is our constitution, or would our constitution look the same as a United States constitution? We don't know. Uh, but yeah, anyways, do you want to add something?
Yeah, I definitely think, like what you said, a new constitution would take quite a lot of time in creating. It'd have to be quite lengthy. Um, but I think you brought up one good point, which was like we have to come together, under some sort of like identity and realize like who we are. I think once you achieve that, then there can be a lot more that can be done, I would say. Like, I know like Japan is quite different from Peru, but how they sort of settled their disputes between different like tribes and like different communities was they just kind of came together. Well, I think there was some government persuasion to that, right? Centralized government persuasion, but the the people of Japan, set aside like these differences, realized that they were Japanese, the people of their lands, and they came together. And fast forward, before World War II, they were quite a powerful country. Um, and I think I agree with you more that something has to be done so we can set aside some of these differences. Only then, I think. Well, I mean, obviously, with other things as well, have to come into play, but there can be more progress. Um, and I agree. A new constitution would be good, I think, for the people.
What do you think of Alex said? He said a certain percentage of representatives should come from an indigenous communities. They should also have some veto powers.
I can agree with that. Have indigenous communities from the rural parts of Peru not been at a disadvantage for quite some time? So I can agree with his comment. I think so. If you would agree, also more.
Absolutely, and I would invite Alex to check out Peruvian constitution in case you haven't yet, and look at Article 191, 190, and 191, which is under the. You know what? Let's go there now. How about we do that, Marcus? You wanna hop into the Peruvian constitution? Let's go to Article 190 and 191. Okay, because this is under the idea, and I think that comment is such a perfect comment because it goes into our next section, right? If you go to the Constitution of Peru and you go to chapter 15, or is it 14? I can't really read Roman numerals. It's either 14 or 15. It's the chapter on decentralization, and I think what the spirit behind Alex's comment is this decentralization of power. Um, the idea of decentralizing power and giving out power to different communities so that they can also advocate for themselves and have a say so in, again, prece- huge national proceedings that affect their livelihood on a day-to-day basis, including the people that are affected by bills, by projects, and especially road projects, mining projects. The people that are affected from that should definitely have a say so in Congress, or at least the power to, I live, let's say in a hypothetical situation, I live in the Andes of Peru. There is a project to install a mining company. Well, apparently the congressmen are not going to ask the questions that I think should ask. So I should have the ability to, call them into question and ask, how is it going to affect my community? How is it going to affect the natural resources already in place in the country? All those questions that don't necessarily get addressed by these very lacking congressmen and women.
Yeah, I know we had talked about this earlier. I think I think that could be really good, for the Peruvian people
So,
with the sorry.
no, you're good. So basically, Alex, I think you can do that, but maybe redistributing. Like, listen to. I'm gonna read Article 190, okay, of the Peruvian Constitution. Take this and use this as a means to make a referendum change, because what you don't want to do, the last thing you want to do is make a change in a I mean, metaphorically speaking, revolutionary, yes, you want a revolutionary idea, yes, but you don't want to do it in a revolutionary way where you try to overtake the government or you try to overtake one branch or the other. That's not what you want to do, because at the end of the day, you're going to go down as with treason, right? What you want to do is use the Constitution to amend itself. So you want to use the Constitution to amend itself, to make a change. So that way, if there is any change, it will go down in history as a democratic change, a change that the people voted and claimed for. Uh, and it has to be done through a democratic means. Otherwise, it goes down in history as something just, even maybe they'll call you terrorists, because I mean, people in Peru have done exactly what I'm saying, have done, try to seek out a change. You know what happens? Now they're called terrorists. I mean, was there maybe different people with different agendas behind all that? Maybe that caused economical loss and killed many people, maybe. But I do know that one of the main reasons why people started protesting against the government is because they're just underprivileged, they're underprivileged, they're marginalized. How would you like to live one generation after generation with having little education, little opportunity for wealth? There are no roads, your village sucks, there's no power, there's no light, there's no opportunity. You go to the city, they treat you like an indigenous person, they make fun of your language because you speak Quechua. They don't want to hire you. Like, how are you supposed to react to that? So the original sentiment was a change, right? But sometimes things go very bad, and so what ended up happening was that people were dying, and so because started dying, we started calling them, or they started calling them different names. Sorry, that all of that. I feel like I tend to go too much on a side. I guess sidetracked it too quick.
No, you're good. I think we did want to keep it around 2 hours. So, more, not sure if you had anything else you wanted to add.
Oh yes, it is. I do want to add one more thing. uh, which is this. Okay, Article 190. Okay, to everybody who's listening, Article 190 of the decentralization chapter of the Peruvian Constitution says the following: regions are created on basis of contiguous areas with historical, cultural, and administrative and economic relations, thus comprising sustainable geoeconomic unities. That's how regions are created. It's literally telling you how regions are created. Regions are the equivalent of states. Okay, Marcus, in case you didn't know that because you are not Peruvian. Um, Regions are the
Oh,
equivalent of states. Okay, provinces are the equivalent of counties, I think, and districts are equivalent to cities. So Peru is a republic, is not a federal government. So you have to translate there a little bit. The same article says the following, Alex, if you're listening. The regionalization, meaning when you're trying to regionalize the, the place, process shall begin by electing governments in the current departments in the constitutional province of Callao. These are regional governments. Two or more, this is so important, dude. Two or more contiguous departments may become a region by conducting a referendum in accordance with the law. Likewise, two or more contiguous provinces and districts may change their regional constituency by following the same procedure. And what binds all of these regions? Here is the key word: historical, cultural, and administrative and economic relations is what binds these regions. Historical and cultural keywords. The article ends like this: additional authorities and faculties, as well as special incentives given to these newly formed regions, shall be determined by law. Okay, not a big deal. While the integration process is underway, two or more regional governments may create coordinating mechanisms between them. Okay, here's a passage from Article 191. The basic organic structure of these governments consists on the regional council as the regulatory and oversight body. Okay, never mind. Regional. So uh, that was the main article that I wanted to read to all of you guys. That regions can be regionalized. They can be regionalized according to historical and cultural relations that they may have to other regions, and this can be done through referendum. Now, referendum could be asked not only through the executive, judicial, and legislative, but guess who? The people can actually ask for a referendum. The people can unite under agreement of something and ask for a referendum. If government is not going to represent you, what you want to do is get on a group with other people who agree on certain principles and ideas. make that a referendum, go through all those, procedures to make it into a referendum, take it to Congress. Even if they don't want to listen, then go on national television and have them listen to you, because it's by law that a group people can call things into referendum insofar as you have signatures, or you have to a certain amount of signatures that you need to have to call things into referendum. So is it impossible? Is it not in the Constitution? No. It, it's quite possible and quite democratic. So you can grab all the regions of the coast and make it into one major coastal region. You can grab all the regions of the Andes, make it a huge one region. You can grab all the regions of the Amazon and make it into a huge region. Insofar, then you would end up with three major regions: the coastal, the Andean, and the Amazonian region. But those would be regions. You still need one government that oversee, or that is above the regional governments, or sort of speak, the state's government. You need an overseeing government that can be made up of native people, right? But to finish this idea, it would be a way of decentralizing the power so concentrated in Lima. Lima and its um, vermin have taken democracy hostage. They have sequestered our dignity and our pursuit of happiness, and they have made it their own affair to um, to make decisions about our lives. So when you regionalize the country and distribute power to even the Amazon, they can weigh in on the decision making. As a state, as an Amazonian state, they can weigh in onto decisions that are made about the country. Likewise, the Andean people could weigh in, and the power will be decentralized and distributed into three major sections: the Andes, the coast, and the jungle. What do you think, Marcus?
That was pretty powerful what you just said, more. Wow.
Why do you say that? And also read some of the comments if you want.
Yeah, yeah. Actually, I was going to read a couple of the comments. But yeah, yeah. I mean, like, you pretty much pointed it out for everyone, man. Like, Lima is like the administration in Lima is solely responsible for most of the lives, if not all the lives of Peru. And that includes the good and the bad, you know? Um, and they're obviously not doing their part in improving the lives of all Peruvians like they should be. A lot of it's corruption. A lot of it's, because of like what you had brought earlier, those gifts, right? A lot of people are bought out, and it's just very messy, right?
Oh,
Uh,
wow. Um,
huh?
just wanted to say Alex is leaving. I'm
Oh
paying
yeah,
Alex.
thanks, Alex. Yeah, I was glad to have him in. Yeah, so see what Sylvia said. They could, but they are divided. It will be hard to unite the people. Yeah, like what you brought up earlier more is just so like unfortunately there's like discrimination from like other brown Peruvians just because you speak a different language, right? Because you speak Quechua. Uh I think people in the city, or maybe a lot of them, particularly those maybe from the higher up classes, kind of look down upon someone that comes from like a rural, like indigenous community and speaks Quechua, right? So I think that sort of discrimination has to be eliminated in one way or another. if not reduced greatly, if a new constitution referendum were to take place.
I think, Marcus,
Hmm.
I think if something like this were to happen, and I feel, I don't know if Alex already left, but Alex, I feel you. He's like, thank you to I live in a rural I lived in a rural community outside of Cusco, Peru for years, and very pleased that you're all talking about this. I see what you were saying about the regions, but Congress. So I feel like maybe he's not completely convinced about this idea, um, and maybe to your satisfaction, Alex, what would end up happening, right? Because you want to create some sort of transitional state. You don't want to go in there like, oh, we're working out the kinks and smoothing this out. Like, that's going to create chaos and instability. You want to go in there with something quite concrete, enumerated, like, yo, this is what we're going to do, and we're going to follow through this. Because otherwise, if you, let's say you call into election, you're going to create a moment of instability. Like, companies are going to be like, are we good, are we, they're kicking us out, can we invest, and like the prices are going to go up. You don't want to cause, you want to cause the least amount of stress on the people when you're transferring or you are transforming the face of the government. So I think that what would end up happening would probably be like, if you have a set of, for example, the congressmen and women, and the judicial people, and even the president currently now, would be their power and their responsibility would be reduced for um, for the region of Lima only, for the region of the coast. So they wouldn't have any. You know how the states here in the United States have, they're independent to a certain degree, and they have their own government, each state. Likewise, the Lima government would not be able to, go against the decisions that the jungle, the Amazon region may have, or the Amazonian region they have. So their power would be uh, constricted or reduced to a regional level. They still get to hold their position, right? Because I don't think you want to go in there and start kicking everybody out. And you're fired, you're fired, get out. It would just be chaotic as hell. You would reduce their power to a regional level, still maintain them, and then call them into I don't know, a hearing maybe. How come you guys sucked so bad? How come so many years? Did you know that Keiko had more than the majority of congressmen and women in 2019 before the pandemic, and she didn't make any major changes the way that she speaks and disputes during her candidacy? She didn't do any of that. She had like like 80% of congressmen were in her, were for popular force. 80% of the congressmen in and women in Congress in 2019 were popular force. Did she make the changes? Did she advocate what she wanted, what she said she would in her candidacy? No, she didn't. She didn't do any of those things that she said she would, which makes you think that she's not in it for reals, for reals. Uh, would you be okay? I know we're like over to. I just want to read some of the comments.
You're fine. Don't worry.
Says you could tell the colonizers. No, I'm not going to read that. The indigenous are starting. They could, but they are divided and will be hard to unite the people. Well, and this is something that I was talking about with Marcus. That I think that many countries, not just Peru, and this actually applies to all our audience, to all your audience, Marcus, whether you're from Peru or Mexico or wherever you're from. Um, what they have in common is the infrastructure. The infrastructure of these countries suck, especially Peru. So I think that if you're trying to find a uniting idea, and I think I may have said this already, like in a different video that we made, Marcus, is that unite people under the idea of infrastructure. We need roads, queens and kings, we need roads to get us places quickly, quickly, not to take us 5 hours to get from one place, from one part of the country to another. Not to randomly die while we're driving because the lanes are one are coming apart and they're only one going this way and one going the other way. And that we don't randomly die when we're driving near a mountain and there is like a rock slide and it hits your car and completely obliterates your car because the roads have been constructed too close to the mountain. So really like basic ass infrastructure, that can really unite. And I like to really say this, unite people, CEOs, and a person in Lima, a CEO in Lima, unite to a tribal person in the deep jungle of Peru. Like, what idea could unite those two kind of people? Infrastructure. I bet you the indigenous, the tribal person in the deep jungles of Peru wants water. He probably doesn't want to go every day and dig water. They probably want light at night when it gets dark. They probably want medicine so that their tummies don't hurt. They probably want to know certain things, so they need education. Likewise, the CEO in Lima, if you have a company and you need to distribute your goods and services, well, which road do you want to take? You want to take the road that's going to take you 10 hours to get from one place to another, or do you want a wider, easier, better quality road that is going to ensure that your truck is going to move fast through the many destinations that needs to deliver these goods and services, you know so in that sense, I think infrastructure could really unite a CEO in Lima and a tribe leader in the jungle. What do you think?
Yeah, I agree. I definitely think infrastructure could, pave way for a lot more advancement in the better well-being of people in Peru as well. It's the creation of more jobs, right? Um, you could possibly have, yeah, higher wages as well for people that come from less developed areas that really just need to make money, right? So I think with more infrastructure in place, it's more jobs. It's better for the economy. You're able to, you know, have better transportation. You can move goods better, quicker from place to place, and people as well, obviously. So I think that infrastructure would be extremely beneficial to the Peruvian people. I don't see why they haven't jumped on this more, honestly. Perhaps it could be because of the state of the country right now, but I don't think it would hurt to get more involved in building better infrastructure, more roads, especially better housing.
Yeah, and just to finish it off, I would say, roads is only one type of need of infrastructure that they
Of course.
really need. I think another one would be like literal, like not even the curriculum, but like the literal building of a school.
Hmm.
Like, can you believe that Peru is so dysfunctional that we can't even talk about the curriculum yet? Because we don't even have a. How can you talk about the curriculum if you don't even have a room to go into? That's how bad it is. Because like you go to a high school in the Amazon of Peru, it's completely different than to a high school in Lima. Why? Because there's no standardized infrastructure of what a high school should have, and there's no like the bare minimum that it should have. Maybe a soccer field and a football field, and all this stuff, and the bathrooms suck, and it's just not. There's no unity and equality and structure fully developed yet.
Yeah, of course, schools especially. Like so many Peruvian parents want their kids to go to good schools, right? And a lot of these schools are not really fit for modern teaching, for just 21st century um, educational development. It's just not there. So definitely Peru could benefit very much so from better schools with better infrastructure. So I think, you know, Peru is still has quite a ways to go, but there isn't, I mean, it's not impossible. I think if, you know, the administration, politicians can get things together, perhaps something good can come from, you know, a new constitution, referendums and whatnot. But ultimately, change does need to happen eventually. It can't continue to stay like this. So I'm optimistic, but I think things take time. But I'm glad that we were able to have this live, right? And identify problems and come up with solutions, you know?
Okay, yeah, absolutely. How about we finish this beautiful set? Maybe if you want, Marcus, since we're gonna chill for like maybe sometime the after party, maybe you can link up. Maybe Ralph can join us because he was pretty cool, like inputting like informative ideas and topics that it shows that he cares enough to be here and knows.
Yeah, and I agree. I just wanted to address one more thing. Yes, I do think that investments from Peruvian Americans could very much impact the lives of Peruvians, especially those from less fortunate areas. I think it could be, well, I mean, it depends on how the agenda is directed and how it would be pushed, right? I think with younger generations, perhaps giving them this good concrete understanding of, this is where you're from, this is where you're from, right? And it's important to support, like, where your ancestry comes from. You come from Peru. Your family was from there at some point. It would be good to help by helping those from your ancestral lands. You are doing good. You're improving the lives of people there, and I think you're doing your part because they could see that they're doing their part in a way, because obviously they're not in Peru, right? So they can't help directly, but they believe that they're contributing to a noble cause, which is helping people in Peru that don't have access to good infrastructure, maybe to get all their food on the table, right? So you're really doing something special for them. So I think that I, it could be a good direction, perhaps. But yeah, I guess someone said hi, and yeah, we're gonna wrap this up. More? Did you have anything else you wanted to say? I'll drop a link if anyone wants to join in our late after party.
Nope, I'm good. Thank you for listening and join us if you want.
Yeah,
Goodbye.
of course. Yeah. And I'll leave my little goodbye real quick. Yeah. Thank you, gracias, for those that wanted to tune in. Right. I really appreciate everyone's comments. Did someone leave a comment here? Oh, yeah. People's comments and whatnot. Sorry, guys. And your feedback is always welcomed. If you like the video, the live, just leave a like. If you're new, subscribe here. And yeah, if you have any questions or comments you want to leave, feel free to leave them once this live's over. So yeah, it's nice to be back on here. And again, thank you all for wanting to come on. So I think we're going to wrap this up now. So I'm going to end the broadcast, and I hope you all have a nice night or morning.